Hello, my dear friends. You're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of November of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation from the western side, from the eastern flank, and from the southern flank as well. So as you can see, during the previous 24 hours, the map has been updated significantly. So let's start and let's talk about everything and let's discuss everything in details. And first let's talk about the western Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. So as for the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we haven't received anything that can confirm additional changes on the ground. We just would like to point your attention that during the previous 48 hours, the several pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, Russians managed to cut in pincers Ukrainians on the territory of the Tokmachka citadel. So we believe and we expect that in coming days or maybe in coming hours, the Russians will secure this territory, and the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information. Now let's talk about the central Zaporozhye direction, or the Orekhov direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates from this area. So as you can see, the map has been updated, and the map was updated based on the report that was published by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Today the Russians stated that as a result of clashes, the units of the group of forces Dnipro managed to secure completely the settlement of Tokmachka in the Zaporozhye region. So this is the situation by the end of the 14th of November of 2025 and by the end of 15th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 16th of November. Based on the report that was published by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map and we colored these territories under complete control of Russian forces. But before we are moving further, I would like to point your attention that most of the mappers adjusted their maps, but you need to understand one thing, that currently nobody knows for sure where exactly the line of combat contact is going, because everybody adjusted the entire Tokmachka, and but nobody knows for sure whether the Ukrainians were completely forced to fall back from this area. Neither the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation nor any pro-Russian source published any video where we could see Russian soldiers and Russia's flags across the settlement. So we just adjusted the map based on the report, but maybe and very likely the situation on the ground probably a bit differs from this situation that you can see right now in front of your screens. For example, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that the entire Tokmachka was secured, but we haven't adjusted, for example, the northwestern part, the part that is very close to the city of Orekhov itself. We believe that probably this area is a gray zone, still gray zone. Anyway, we are waiting for additional videos. We believe that in coming days, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation or some pro-Russian sources will publish any video where we might see Russians with flags. Especially we want to see a video where we could see soldiers, Russian soldiers on the territory of the former women prison in the most southern part. So we are talking about the Tokmachka citadel, the most important stronghold of the settlement. So we hope that we will get a video at least from this area. Anyway, we have adjusted the map, and if this information that was provided by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation is correct, then the distance between Russian positions on the territory of Tokmachka and Russia's positions on the territory of the settlement of Orekhov is less than 2 kilometers when talking about this line, and is less than 4 kilometers when talking about the TO-815 road, this one. So as you can see, the distance, there is no distance at all. It's basically the Russians are already on the territory of Orekhov. Furthermore, from this perspective, from these positions, most likely Ukrainians currently have huge problems with the territory of Novodanilovka. They will have no possibilities to supply and support their contingent, because now Ukrainians use this road for these purposes, but we see that this road goes very close to the edge positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So we believe that if the settlement of Tokmachka fell, then most likely in coming days the Russians would be able to secure the settlement of Novodanilovka as well. So in coming days, the Russians most likely will break through Ukrainian defense and will continue advancing further in the direction of Orekhov. But at the same time, very likely that Russians will continue offensive operation in the northern direction, trying to establish control over the fields, over the fortifications between TO 814 road and the current positions. So we're talking about this line. So Russians can move in this area because the Russians are interested in this offensive operation, because telling the truth, this TO 814 road currently is the only road that Ukrainians can use and can have to supply and support their contingent on the territory of the settlement of Huliaipole. So this road goes between the settlement of Orechov and Huliaipole. There is another road that goes from Zaliznichne in the northern direction. This is another supply line that Ukrainians can use, and most likely they're using this road right now. But the thing is that both roads could be cut by Russians if they move in the north, if they begin offensive operation in the northern direction. And this is exactly what the Russians will do in coming days, because today we got lots of interesting updates from the group of forces East. Today the Russians stated that as a result of offensive operation they managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Rovnopol. So this is a very important video and a very important statement that was made by pro-Russian source. So let's take a look at this video once again. This is the video that was published by the group of forces East. So right now on this screen, we can see the situation on the ground, let's say by the end of the 15th of November. So this is the situation on the ground according to pro-Russian source. But now pro-Russian source adjusts his own map, and by the end of the 16th of November, the Russians show the territory and the map around the settlement of Rovnopol like this. So as you can see, the village of Rovnopol and the village of Yablokova were colored in red, but they created or they left a small gap, small pocket to the east of Rovnopolye. So we believe that the Russians are trying to tell us that they managed to capture both these villages, Rovnopolye and Yablokova, but at the same time the Russians managed to encircle probably several dozens or several hundreds of Ukrainians to the east of Rovnopolye. So if we return back to our map, according to pro-Russian source, there is a pocket like this where several hundreds or several dozens of Ukrainians were blacked and cuts in cauldron. We colored everything based on the video that was published by a pro-Russian source, because we believe that despite the fact that there are probably several hundreds of Ukrainians that were encircled, we believe that the Russians would be able to secure this territory in coming days, maybe even in coming hours. So that is why we colored everything, and maybe tomorrow this territory would be colored under complete Russian control as well. So this is the video where we can see how Russians were fighting for the settlement of Rovnopolye. And as usually in such videos, in the final part of this, let's say, video, we can see at least 3 episodes how Russians were raising the Russian flag across the settlement of Rovnopolye. 3 flags were raised according to this video, 1 of them in the eastern part and 2 of them in the southwestern parts. So based on this video, once again, we colored this territory in the complete Russian control. So, and from these positions, the distance between Russian forces and the settlement of Huliaipole is less than 6 kilometers, and the distance between Russian forces along the road between Huliaipole and Malinovka and the city of Huliaipole itself is less than 3 kilometers. So the Russians are very close to the city of Huliaipole, which means that the battle for this settlement most likely is going to start even in November of 2025. Maybe during the last days, the Russians will begin offensive, and during December the Russians will try to establish complete control over the territory before 2026 comes. So once again, the village of Rovnopolye was captured, and the settlements of Veselye, Zelenogay and Chervone were caught in cauldron by Russians. We came to this conclusion based on the videos that were published by pro-Ukrainian sources from this road. We will not watch this video because there are lots of casualties and too many violence, but these videos show us the clashes along this road between Russians and Ukrainians. So based on this video, we adjusted the map and we came to the conclusion that the Russians went down from the settlement of Rovnopolye and cut this road physically. So this is the situation. It will take up to a week for Russians to finish the battle for these 3 villages, to secure this dense network of the fortifications, and probably to get as close as possible to the road R85 and to cut this road physically on the line between the settlements of Dobropolye and Varvarovka. So Russians will not start any offensive operation in the direction of Huliaipole until they cut the road a bit further to the north of the settlement. Only then the clashes for Huliaipole will begin. And you know that the most interesting thing is that Russians have the right, and the Russians can do this. They can continue moving further in the western direction. And I believe that the Russians will do this. You know that when talking about the city of Pokrovsk, when talking about any direction, we see that the Ukrainians are retreating, but they're showing at least some resistance. But when talking about the Zaporozhye direction, I believe that that you understand this and that you see that Ukrainians don't show any resistance. They're retreating, and every single 2 or 3 days, sometimes every second day, the Russians publish information that they managed to secure another settlement. So, and this is very important, because if Russians understand that the Ukrainians don't have any defense in this area, that they have huge problems with manpower, then most likely the Russians, before moving further in the southern direction towards the city of Huliaipole, they may try to cross the river in this area and to advance further in the western direction. So there is a river by the name of Gaichul, and the Russians, after the clashes for Nichaevka and Radisna, and by the way, the Russians are approaching these villages right now, they may try to cross the river with the purpose to establish control over the settlement by the name of Ternuvata. So this is a very huge settlement that can be used by Russians for concentration of their units, and if Russians somehow are able to cross the river and to take this settlement of Ternuvata and the complete control, this is going to be the beginning of the complete Zaporozhye direction disaster. Russians from the settlement of Ternuvata will continue moving further in the western direction almost until they get the city of Zaporozhye from its eastern part. So no doubts that this river of Haichul is the barrier. It's like something like a final test for the entire Zaporozhye defense of Ukraine. And as you can see, Ukrainians from their side during the previous months, during the previous years, since the beginning of the special military operation, managed to create a dense network of the fortifications exactly in this area. They think and they believe that this network of the fortifications will allow them to slow down the Russians. And this is the point. This is the most important moment. If Ukrainians are not able to stop the Russians here, they will not be able to do this until the city of Zaporozhye. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously the most interesting things in 2025 are still ahead of us. Now let's talk about the area of the responsibilities of the group of forces east of the 29th Army. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions to the south of Velika Mikhailovka. The Russians are preparing a foothold to the south of the settlement. They're trying to outflank and to block the settlement of Velika Mikhailovka from the southwest, from the south, from the southeast, and from the east. And when it happens, Russians will launch their major offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory, and this is going to be a first village or the second settlement probably in the Pavlograd direction. From these positions, Russians will continue offensive operation deep inside of the Dnipro region with the purpose in the end to take under complete control the settlement of Pavlograd and to block Dnipro and Zaporozhye itself. From this area, we have two important things that I would like to discuss with you. The first one is coming from the settlement of Vasilyovska. This is just a video that was published by pro-Russian sources by the Ministry of Defense, and here we can see how Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover two launching systems, probably launching systems that Ukrainians were using to attack deep inside of the territory of Russian Federation with missiles, and the Russians attacked this territory, this launching site, and as a result of attack, the two launching systems of the armed forces of Ukraine were destroyed. So this is the first video, and the second thing that I would like to discuss with you is the fog. As you know, the Russians during the previous 1 or 2 weeks managed to improve their positions significantly across the entire line of combat contact, starting from the siege of Zaporizhzhia and ending with the settlement of Mirnograd. And the sources are saying, and most of the experts are telling us, that the Russians managed to do this because when the foggy period of time came, Russians used these advantages situation and began offensive. And under the cover of fog, the Russians managed to cross huge distances to land infantry and to dig in deeper. So, for example, Novopavlovka is the best example of this situation. For example, today we got another video where we can see how Ukrainian drone was flying in the city of and around the settlement of Novopavlovka, trying to find Russian vehicles, but everything was covered with fog, and it was very difficult for Ukrainians to find vehicles of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So that situation, this foggy situation, allowed Russians to take under complete control almost more than 80% of the settlement of Novopavlovka just within 2 days, just during 2 days of clashes. So, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 14th of November of 2025. This is the moment when Ukrainians controlled more than 80% of the settlement, and telling the truth, everybody had doubts whether the Russians were able to do anything with this situation. But 2 days later, we see a completely different picture. Ukrainians were forced to fall back, most likely from this side of the river of Salona, and now the Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation on their side with the river, not to allow the Russians to advance further. But it seems that Ukrainians, due to the current weather, will not be able to do this. But this is not what I'm trying to tell you. This fog, so what is this? And the question is not about the fact that Russians use this fog for advancing not just in the city of Novopavlovka, but also in the area of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. The question is the following. But before we start, once again, let's take a look at the video when Russians were entering the city of Pokrovsk with hundreds of vehicles and so on. Probably we will not be able to find this video right now. Anyway, I believe you understand what I'm trying to show you. So you remember the video when hundreds of Russian soldiers were entering the city of Pokrovsk under cover of fog. The question is that I have right now is if Russians were able to use this, let's say, natural barrier as fog to improve their positions significantly across the city of Pokrovsk, the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and other different directions. The question is why the Ukrainians didn't do the same. So you know that this is the fog, and this fog plays the same game both for Russians and for Ukrainians. The Russians were attacking, and fog protected them from Ukrainian FPV drones. So, which means that Ukrainians, if they decided to, let's say, break through the Mirnograd encirclement and to escape this area, they could use the same weather conditions. But for some reasons, the Ukrainians didn't do this. So, and this is the most important question. Why the Ukrainians refuse to use fog for evacuation purposes? The sources are saying that there are currently several thousands of soldiers on the territory of Mirnograd that were blocked by the Russians. And for some reason, the Ukrainians didn't use this advantageous situation to save their personnel. So anyway, currently I don't have answers to this question, but the situation is very weird. Anyway, let's discuss the current situation, and as you can see, during the previous 24 hours we had changes on the ground. So this is the situation by the end of the 15th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 16th of November. The Russians improved their positions in fields to the south of the settlement of Grishina. Now the Russians are moving using broad frontline attack. They are tasked to establish control over the M30 road and over the railways, and to improve their positions like this, to outflank the settlement of Sergeyevka and to prepare a foothold before moving further and deeper, almost till the borders with the Kharkiv region. As for the northern part and the Olympiyskaya Street, as you can see, we have adjusted the map in this area as well. This is the situation by the end of the 15th, this is the 16th, and the pro-Ukrainian sources published this video. And here we can see how 3 Russian soldiers were attacking this territory. In this video, we can see how Ukrainian FPV drones were attacking Russian soldiers that were moving exactly in this area. So you may see this road, this corner of the road, and this is the corner on the map. So Russians were trying to answer these facilities, most likely from the north, with the purpose to capture them. We believe that this video is archived because this territory, or at least this part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, was colored several days ago. So this video confirms that indeed did something like this was happening here. So, and this is another proof that Ukrainians are no longer able to escape the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd cauldron. Furthermore, today we received a very interesting update that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Today, since the beginning of the battle for the Pokrovsk agglomeration, the pro-Ukrainian sources colored completely as a gray zone the entire southern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. I think that it's better to add this gray zone to our map as well for better understanding of the situation, and probably tomorrow we will do this and we will discuss this gray zone in details probably by the morning of the 17th of November 2025. So the situation is a disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine. Just the city of Mirnograd, more precisely its central and western parts, under control of the armed forces of Ukraine, and without any chances for evacuation. We expect and we believe that in coming days the Russians and the Ukrainians will begin negotiation process. Furthermore, we'd like to point to your attention that currently the Ustam Umerov, the Secretary of Defense of Ukraine, several days ago, he fled to the territory of Istanbul. He was trying to organize talks with the Russian Federation on the matter of prisoner exchange. Then he left Istanbul and he went to the United Arab Emirates, probably, or Qatar, where he's trying to do the same to establish the negotiation, let's say, sites with Russians for prisoner exchange. And the pro-Ukrainian sources are saying that the Ukrainians are planning to exchange 1,200 soldiers. So I'm not sure what is going to happen and whether he's doing this or not, but obviously if there are 1,000 and let's say 200 soldiers of Ukrainians on the territory of Mirnograd, obviously due to complete encirclement of them, Russians may demand much more. Russians can tell that you must give us 2,000 soldiers and we will release these 1,200. So as you can see, the negotiation process may be started, and now Ukrainians are trying to find a place where they can talk, where they can begin talks with Russians on this matter. But when talking about Russians, they still haven't given us any official statement, any official detail about these possible talks and negotiations. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sivers direction. During the previous 12 hours, small changes were recorded in the area of Zvanovka, so it seems that Russians launched their major offensive operation. The Russians most likely are tasked to finish the battle for these territories as soon as possible. They will finish the battle for Zvanovka in this pocket, and from these positions the Russians may try to advance in the northern direction with the purpose either to cut physically or to cut with drones the road Svetopokrovskoye Sivers. If the Russians can do this, if the Russians do this, the city of Sivers would become operational encirclement, because there is another road, this one, but this road is already under complete FPV drone control. The Russians, during the previous 24 hours, published several videos from this road to 513 of how they were attacking and destroying Ukrainian vehicles. So all roads to Sivers are under complete control without any chances for Ukrainians to break through them. And that's it for this today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.